Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. We extend a special welcome to our visitors this morning. We're really happy that you've joined us. If you haven't already stopped by the newcomer table outside those back doors in Robinson Lounge, we invite you to do so. We can put you on our e-list and you'll get invitations to all of the many different programs and events that we have going on here, and you're invited to all of them. And of course, we extend a special welcome and word of honor to our mothers. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Thank you for being here in worship this morning. It's great to see you. We have a lot of announcements going on and happenings. I invite you to take a look at it to see what's happening, including that Princeton Eats Plants is honored to have Dr. Michael Greger coming this Wednesday, May 15th at 6:30. He will be reading from his book, How Not to Age, the scientific approach to getting healthier as you get older. Princeton Eats Plants wants to remind you that what is healthy for the body is also healthy for the climate. And there are still available seats for this event, but it is filling up. So look for the flyer at the welcome table for more information. Also, the Women's Alliance is having their end of year celebration with lunch this Thursday, May 16th from 12 to 2. Lunch is at 12. The program is at 1. Every Women's Alliance meeting is awesome, but this one is particularly awesome because it's the one with strawberry shortcake. That's how they end their year. So go at noon for that. Following the annual meeting, Joelle Piercy of our Bell Choir will discuss choices, boundaries, and consent, recognizing, responding to, and preventing domestic violence. That's the program. That'll be around 1 or so, give or take. No reservation is needed, and all congregants, all guests, everyone is welcome to that celebration. And lastly, there is still a chance to pick up some flowers, some plants for Mother's Day right out there in Channing. These are left over from our spring sale, but there are still a few out there. And if you purchase them, all the money that you offer for them will go to outreach grants and everything that the spring sale goes to. So stop by after worship and get some plants. And now with mind and heart, with reverence and joy, let us be together for this hour to remember peace, to praise the good, to care for one another, and to grow in love. Come, let us worship together.
We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time.
In honor of Mother's Day, our reading this morning is a poem titled Claire de Lune by Jean Kreiling. It'll be back on in a second. And in honor of Mother's Day, our reading this morning will be a poem titled Claire de Lune by Jane Kreiling, and then we'll have our meditation. This is the poem. There's D flat major at the first and last, but in between a haze of harmonies yearns lightward, though the light has long since passed. I played the notes, she heard the light. The keys were mine to coax and animate. Their sound was hers to claim, a shimmer of heart's ease. And while my fingers etched and danced and found their way through black and white, her ear would find a prism, her own light parsed and unbound. She had a knack for joy and was inclined to wonder. Claire de Lune had mesmerized her in a spell that left me far behind. After my mother's death, I was surprised I still played it so often. I suppose the effort occupied and organized my sorrow-scattered mind. So in the throes of grief, I practiced as if I'd impress a ghost with my devotion. And in those half-haunted hours, I mastered more, I guess, than just the notes. I hadn't thought I'd learn to hear what she did, but through some finesse of time and skill and need, I now discern the half-lit murmurings that no midnight can mute, the moon-pale promise that can turn unrest to peace, a star-strung appetite for my breath. At last, I share my mother's light. And today, with meals and calls, and for many with the most tender of memories, we honor the moms of our lives. We hold those who are missing their moms these days, those who've gone on to live in blessed memory. May their joyful memories abound even as they hold their grief. And we hold those celebrating in person or over the phone or Zoom with their moms who are still here. May their joy and gratitude fill them up and spread in the world. And we hold those who will spend this day worried about their moms for reasons of health or happiness or any condition. May their love provide them comfort. We honor the moms themselves whose hearts beat with concern and dedication for those they've raised or are raising. May they know and be told how appreciated and essential they are in the lives of their loved ones. May they feel valued and cared for, and may they be pampered a bit this day and always. And we hold those moms who are sad in our hearts today, those for whom this day is particularly heavy with loss and absence. May they know compassion and be held. For the lasting light of a mother's love, one that blesses beyond our days and lives in us forever, one that still instills warmth and understanding and assurance through the generations, we give thanks this day and always. And here in the silence of this sacred space, we offer these, the prayers and meditations of our hearts. May it be so, and amen.
The first time I left for General Assembly, nearly 30 years ago, I barely made my flight, hurriedly boarding with nothing but my wallet and a cell phone the size of a small brick. I didn't even have a change of underwear or toothbrush with me. GA, as you'll hear from Bill in a moment, is the annual gathering of our denomination's clergy, lay leaders, and interested congregants. In the 1990s, more than 5,000 UUs from around the world would descend on a small city and dominate its media landscape during the 4-day conference. I was extremely stressed because I'd been selected to deliver a keynote sermon on the conference's focus that year on youth, the first sermon I ever wrote, which I'd first sort of delivered here and gone on to deliver at a couple of other UU congregations. I sort of delivered it here in that I hadn't actually finished it by Sunday morning and ended it by lamenting, shit, I knew this would happen. I've been up the last 2 nights trying to write this damn thing and I still don't have an ending. Our minister, Paul Johnson, was sitting in the front row and I remember seeing his face go white. In my early 30s, I didn't exactly cut the image of propriety one might expect to see at a pulpit. Most members of the UUA's GA Planning Committee, by contrast, did, as pillars of their communities who practiced good hygiene. And yet they'd selected my sermon, iconoclastic and challenging of the status quo as it was. When we arrived in Indianapolis, my anxiety began to release. To my surprise, I could identify the Unitarian Universalists among the strangers in the airport. A distinctive openness and kindness radiated from the faces of the adult UUs hurrying to their hotels. The teenagers gathered in a clump with a guitar, singing an Indigo Girls song with the refrain, "There's more than one answer to these questions," pointing me in a crooked line. And the less I seek my source for some definitive, the closer I am to find. That memory always makes me tear up. After arriving at the conference center, I suddenly realized I'd forgotten to book a hotel. And of course, all the hotel rooms were booked. When I blurted this out to myself, a kindly woman nearby said, "There's room in my bed." Oh dear. It turned out she shared a room with several other young adults, arranged haphazardly in 3 large beds. I'm pretty sure there was no hanky-panky in that room while I was there, though I was so stressed and exhausted I probably wouldn't have noticed if there was. The next morning, during the opening ceremony, I thought someone might have spiked my orange juice with magic mushrooms. Trippy is the best word I can conjure to describe the experience of seeing hundreds and hundreds of colorful, creative flags and banners representing over 1,000 congregations and factions of the UU world, represented in a mad parade through the vast main hall of the conference center. My sermon was well attended and went over much better than I could have imagined. I'd actually completed it by then, after all. So when a friend forwarded me an article in the Financial Times a few weeks ago entitled "The Culture Wars Dividing America's Most Liberal Church," and detailing a schism within the UU denomination over a proposed change in its statement of principles, I wasn't too concerned. Unitarians and Universalists have survived challenges before, from a Polish priest accused of heresy in the 1560s to the free-love American transcendentalists of the mid-1800s, that was a controversy, to an unmedicated ADHD lunatic in 1996, that would be me. Our community of congregations around the world has managed to nourish even the most challenging among us. I expect the same will be true of the present generation of activists fighting to make the UUA more inclusive, regardless of which side of the current controversy wins out at General Assembly this year.
Oh, I wish I had been there to see that sermon. That would have been wonderful. Once a magical being fell in such love with another greater magical being that she couldn't take her eyes off of him. She tracked him whenever she could, facing and adoring him, and always awaiting his return when he was out of sight. Alas, her love was unrequited, though. She only had eyes for him, but he had other interests, and so she became increasingly despondent. She sat on the earth, wasting away in despair, watching her would-be lover pass above her in the sky, for that's where he lived, in the sky, while she sat below, ignored, feeling lower and lower. She lost her zest, her zeal, her purpose, her passion, and she became, as it says in the story, deranged by her experience of love. Eventually, she would become so stuck on the earth and in life that she would grow into the soil. Once a water nymph whose presence was most felt in rivers and lakes and streams, she would take root and become a plant that lives in the ground. Her face, however, would continue to gaze up at the heavens, looking for her lover who would never respond to her devotion. Her face would become the face of a sunflower, which follows the sun, especially in its youth across the sky. And so when you see a sunflower, what you're really seeing is a forlorn nymph out of her element, looking for the warmth of love. And haven't we all been there at some point, really? Scientists tell us now that sunflowers face the sun to stay warm and attract bees. They also have their own circadian rhythms, just like we do. And when the sun sets, they turn back to the east to await the next dawn. And while they wait, they rest and conserve energy. They say that younger sunflowers follow the sun across the sky all day and only turn back when the sun goes down. But they also say that as sunflowers age, they start turning back toward the dawn earlier and earlier in the daytime. At some point in the afternoon, even though the sun is still out and the bees are still buzzing, older sunflowers have just had enough and they call it a day. They start resting. Their bedtimes get earlier and earlier. I've never confused myself with a water nymph or the god she loves, but I may very well be turning into a sunflower. I love early bedtimes. In Greek mythology, the water nymph is Clytie. Her would-be love is Apollo, the sun god, the one who is also responsible for Daphne turning into a laurel tree, although that's a very different story. It's why they're always adorned in laurel leaves, though. It's because Apollo loved Daphne. If you get mixed up with Apollo, you might end up as a plant. But plants need the sun, so, it's science and story. It's always science and story. But at the center of the sunflower in the story is a face that seeks love and turns toward it. The sunflower follows love, and even when it disappears, turns to wait for its return. And in real life, it trusts that it will and is rewarded for that trust. For all of its days, the sun will always return. Collectively, love serves this purpose in our faith as well. It is that which we face and follow, serve and celebrate in our days and congregations. The draft new denominational principles to be voted upon next month at the all-virtual General Assembly that Drake mentioned places love at the center of the principles in written and graphic form. Written, the fuller language says love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. And then in graphic form, this draft revision includes a flower, not necessarily a sunflower, but also not necessarily not a sunflower, that has the word love and a chalice right at the center of the flower's face. Around the flower are 6 petals, each representing a shared value: generosity, justice, independence, pluralism, transformation, and equity. This flower has 6 petals. There was always the possibility for it to have many, many more. This draft language was influenced by thousands of UUs across the country over years. And while we have many, many strengths as a faith, being succinct is often not one of them. I went into this hoping for something much shorter than what we ended up with, but as the process slowly unfolded over the years, I became grateful for 6 petals and not 600. A real sunflower has between 34 and 89 petals. Us ending up with 6 is as unusual as a real sunflower only having 6. It does mean that values that we commonly share aren't named in this draft language. I think of peace in particular. There are values that we share and qualities we bear and histories and sources and promises that we make to each other and the stranger that are not in this language. And that will always be the case. Faith is meant to be lived, not only expressed. And a partial act of faith has more impact on the world, blesses more people than even the perfect articulation of belief or of values. Faith is something we do together that blesses us and well beyond us. And when we describe it, we always fall short. The descriptions are always incomplete. They always sound more of intention, which is important, but is also impotent without action. Faith is movement. It's the action. It's the enlivening of the value. It's the engagement. It's the ministry built together by people of like mind and loving heart that intends to serve the holy and the holy purpose. This draft language, which would replace the current 7 principles and 6 sources, describes in the language of denominational bylaws what member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association generally hold in common. And it's important for that reason. It ends up describing us to the world, but it's written in pencil, not ink. It's been amended before and it'll be amended again. There's no divine myth behind the creation of these potential or earlier actual principles. No voices from the sky, no magic, no ancient story, nothing to interpret in light of long ago norms and customs. This language was drafted by us today, and our kids will absolutely do the same thing in their day. And the love expressed as the center of our values and the 6 values themselves are expanded upon in the text version of the language. You can find that online. There are covenantal components to each value, some words about our inspirations, some thoughts on inclusivity, and a very important affirmation of congregational and individual freedom, that quality of freedom being equal to that of love in terms of its importance in our shared religious history and life. Love and freedom are who we are in a million different ways, congregation to congregation. The denominational language reflects love as the center and freedom as the first value and final affirmation that strengthens the power of that love in our shared lives. This draft language was passed at last June's General Assembly in the great city of Pittsburgh and must pass again by a larger margin next month to be final. If the results of the first vote are even close to being repeated next month, then it'll pass pretty comfortably. prior to this entire draft process, there was a movement to add an eighth principle to the existing 7 that addresses anti-racism, which many congregations, including our own, passed independent of the denomination. Those discussions have continued as the process has unfolded, but the specific goal of passing an 8th denominational principle was kind of suspended, and the energy of what was sought in that movement was folded into this revision process. I think, assuming this new language passes, that the 8th principle, energy and commitment, will take new forms and find new expressions. I hope so, anyway. I'm not sure many will have the stomach to try and revise the principles again for a few years after this June, but the real power of the 8th principle movement was really in the conversations it started and the programs it helped and continues to help support. Its real power and influence always rested in how it impacted congregations and guided us in our growth and service. Its real power was never really the written expression of the value, but always how it encouraged and empowered us to enliven the value anew, more creatively and collaboratively. That too was rooted in love, a love for the world that could be, one of greater justice and compassion, of greater forgiveness and reconciliation, a love for the world that is, one in which we can come together to build more blessed and blessing lives than we ever could alone, a love for one another so that we can grow together in joy and celebration and keep going together even when we disagree or disappoint one another. This love comes to us from our traditions, one in which the unity of God's love created a belief in the unity among all people. This led Unitarians to be early proponents of diversity in thought and freedom of belief. With our fundamental unity affirmed, Unitarians avoided coercive creeds and instead created congregations that stressed mutual growth, shared commitments, generosity, and the common good, all promoted through the enlivened values of freedom and love. They came to be representative of progressive religion in America, which saw building social equality and freedom as religious imperatives, as did the Universalists, in some cases far more insistently and actively than the Unitarians, as they proclaim that God's love saves all, and that we are all to live in that same spirit. We are to live more fully and widely and prophetically loving lives, knowing that we'll never match the expanse of God's love, but we should try. We can always be better at that, they preached, because we are held in that love ourselves, and held by that love, we can bless others not just with spirit, but with movements of social good. And it's that love today that will possibly be centered in what many will encounter as a summary of our faith. We are a faith centered on love. It has formed us from the start and forms us anew today. Around it, we humanly and hopefully with some perspective and humor incompletely express some shared values, knowing that how we bring them to life is more important than those expressions anyway. And we follow that love as a sunflower follows the sun, looking toward it for guidance and warmth and touch. But unlike Clytie, we do so not in a forlorn way. We are not despairing, we are not stuck, we are not defeated, and we are not unloved. We are alive in that love, where we know it has touched us. We know it has blessed us. We know that when sad, it has placed people of concern in our company. We know that when frightened, it has given us courage. We know that when lonely, it has urged us to reach out that someone may enter our lives. That love doesn't make life perfect, and sometimes the seasons are really bad, but that love remains a part of us even then. It holds us even then, and is most likely to be known and felt through the presence and words of someone else, a friend who consoles us, a partner who holds us, a child who makes us laugh, the random smile of a kind-eyed stranger. We know too that we can be these holy gifts to everyone. These current draft principles and current actual principles both remind us of that we can and do bless one another in the world. They bear that imperative. The next version will as well. But what we must remember is that our love is beyond principle, beyond language, beyond bylaw, beyond barrier. We are loved to our core, deeper than we'll ever know ourselves, loved with a grace given with our first breath that continues through our last. We are loved every single moment of our lives. We are never stuck yearning for that love. We live in its midst, and it lives in us. And when we build lives of shared faith, it is known by more and more people, and that's when it becomes salvific. And when we live within that assurance, we can be agents of that grace in the lives of everyone we meet. We can enliven the goodness that resides in each heart and build it in strength with hearts and hands joined together. We can build a world of beauty and goodness that blesses beyond any articulation of any belief. May these UU expressions of our UU denomination be enlivened in ways that embrace the lonely, strengthen the frightened, free the oppressed, and tend to the sick. May they bless beyond every barrier we create and imagine and reflect the grace, gift, and strength of a timeless, urgent, and always present love. May it be so, and amen. And at the end of our hour, we extinguish our chalice, knowing that its light carries us until we gather again. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of love and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with everyone else by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.